Shalom, family. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. Always a pleasure and a privilege when we get to join you and sit with you for these weekly times of review, especially as we look at things from the 10,000 foot view, from the biblical perspective. So, welcome, one and all, who come to join us here on our channel, here at Remnant House, the home of the strong and the very courageous. And again, like I said, we're always thankful for all of you. And we do have a wonderful website that we publish all the stories that we cover here on our weekly update, and it's at remnantwatch.com. You'll always find this banner right at the top. It'll bring you right to the latest update itself. And we do have some handy guides for surviving some of the difficulties that are coming upon the earth. And so, just something for you to be aware of. And do have this search bar for the previous stories we've covered in the past. And for those of you that are like me, I don't know, maybe you're a newsie. I don't know. Maybe you're one of those people that dig into these things. I'm not sure. But if you're like me at all, well, we dig a little bit, right? We want to know, what specifically was, basically done or not done, and what consistently we are finding. And so when we see things that are trends, we want to look into that a little bit more. If you're like me, well, then that's something that we like to do. So for those of you that are newsies, like I said, like I am, well, then that's going to be of interest to you. So thank you again for joining us. And always a pleasure and a privilege when we get together and stand together, believe together, and be found faithful together. I mean, that's one of the things that we have to be able to do, or declares that we have been found faithful, right? And so, how is that done? Well, that means you show up, and so that's why we do these weekly. Because I tell you what, I don't know about the rest of you, but I used to get these updates, and I look back now at how often I used to get them pretty bad, and I really believe that that's not healthy for you. I think that if you are getting too many updates too often, you're just going to get frazzled. That's going to be the case. That's what your status is going to be. You're going to end up with a lot of anxiety. I certainly felt it. It was almost as if you were almost looking up all the time. What's next? What's happening next? And then there's the disconnected crowd. You know what I'm talking about. The people like, again, and we've all gone to both extremes, right? So sometimes you're the disconnected crowd. Well, I haven't had a news update and I don't even know how long. And that's the other extreme. So we had to find this happy medium, and something like I said, we call the 10,000 foot view, where we like to be informed without being overwhelmed. And I tell you what, I am very grateful for that, because some of this stuff could be overwhelming if you aren't grounded in the things of the kingdom. And so let me encourage all of you who are to continue to be a barakah, to continue to encourage your brothers and sisters out there, many of which are really suffering from serious anxiety right now, right? So those of you that have that revelation, that are not under the sway of that wickedness, well, then you're going to be able to be an encouragement to others. So this is a big part of why we like to stabilize. And so on that note, let's get into the news. So let me put the comments on there for some of you may want to comment on some of the news, some of the stuff that's going on. I tell you what, some of it is really wild. Especially obviously some of this news regarding the war and things going on with regard to war. Now, we were warned about this. We were told that there would be mass loss of life in the Middle East. Oh, I suppose that's going to block some of the headlines, but we'll take that down. And so we were warned about this. We knew this was coming, but it is still something to behold. And Trump warns China now. This is the latest pivot. And this is, you got to kind of wonder sometimes, are you trying to start world war because you're now pivoting to China, which you're having your hands full with Iran, like we told you would before you went and popped this smoke. And we told you guys that wouldn't be an easy fight. And now you want to pick another fight with China too? My goodness. Talk about the prophecies of Dmitry Duduman and Henry Groover looking a lot more likely if we keep going down this path, right? So, again, those of you that are in the know, if you know, you know, well, then this looks ominous. And according to this top headline, Trump is warning China of big problems. Trump says makes no difference if deal reached or not. Warns China if big problems if it ships arms to Iran. Okay, U.S. President Donald Trump says he is not bothered about the outcome of the U.S.-Iran talks in Pakistan and says the United States has come out ahead from the war. Whether we make a deal or not makes no difference to me. The reason is because we've won. And so, again, they're all taking this we won position. And, I tell you, there are no winners in wars. I've warned you all many, many times. Somebody tell me what the upside of a bomb is. Somebody tell me how that somehow made the world a better place because somebody dropped a bomb on somebody else. Now we're all better. Okay, everybody, we're all better, right? So this is nonsense. There is no winner. And the notion that you can win a war is ridiculous. And so here we go. Trump is acknowledging very deep negotiations with Iran, but says the U.S. military is searching for mines in the Straits of Hormuz, which still remains effectively closed to most freighters carrying oil and natural gas out of the Persian Gulf. So still a major challenge area as we go forward because of the fact that there are mines in the Straits of Hormuz. So now they have the new task of dealing with those mines. And so, of course, negotiations did go on in Pakistan with Vice President Vance. He was, of course, responsible for leading the way. And the U.S. left planned talks in Pakistan this weekend after failing to reach a ceasefire deal with Iran. And of course, the ceasefire is supposed to hold for 2 weeks. So they still have another week to come up with another plan. But folks, it's not looking positive at the moment. For this moment, what it looks like to me is there's a pause for rearmament. And I'm starting to wonder if we were just all set up. So we always wish for peace. That's always our heart, right? Everybody who has a peaceful heart is always going, oh, please put the guns down. You're only killing innocent people who are not involved in whatever argument you leaders are having. Why is it that the average man is the person who usually always pays the bill? Is the average guy? Well, that's about to get worse, folks, because as these things continue to get worse, what it's going to do is affect the economies of the world. And prophecies that were written in the book of Revelation will be making their repeat view in your modern era. So you've got, for example, a man's whole day's wages just to feed his family, just to feed himself. And so this is going to become very, very difficult, which is going to add a tremendous amount of incentive for crime. Okay, so whenever there's that much poverty, there's a tremendous incentive for crime in the earth. And we're going to, I think we're going to continue to see more evidence of that. We're going to continue to see more signs and indications that society is struggling to keep it together, if you will. And right now we're seeing that there's a increase in domestic violence, and that is generally tied directly to the economy. So economy does have a big effect, folks. It really does. It's not a small matter. It's not just things just cost more. No, it impacts the way people interact with one another. Right now, Iran is demanding fees in order for boats to go through the Straits of Hormuz. And this is behind a paywall, folks. But it is demanding. So it's Fortune Magazine. They're demanding fees too. Apparently, everybody's got something behind a paywall. And so Iran has decided to put the Straits of Hormuz behind a paywall. That's exactly what they did. They decided, you know what? You want to come through here? Fine. You're going to pay a toll. You must pay a tax. And where'd they learn this? I don't know. Where'd they learn this from? It's the thing that's really interesting about this entire conflict is the amount of hypocrisy and irony that continues to manifest for the nations. So those that presume that they were the only ones that got to use certain things. I mean, don't you all find it just slightly ironic that the reason why we're going to go to war and blow you up is because we don't want you to have the weapons that we have? Doesn't that strike anybody else as a little bit like, wow, okay. It's like, oh, we're going to fight you because they're a sovereign nation and they clearly can defend themselves. So now there's reports that China has delivered intercontinental ballistic missiles. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are much longer range. They can reach all the way to the North American mainland. And so if that's true, then we're going to continue to see more and more hard talk in the days to come, folks. We're not going to see soft rhetoric anytime soon. In Iran's war live, Iran prepared to continue talks as the Strait of Hormuz blockade is underway. And Iran continues to demonstrate a reasonable but very hard line. They have a particular position. They're not moving from it, and they don't really care what the Americans think. So it's a very interesting experience for the West, as it is not being bowed to, if you will. The Iranian president is prepared to continue talks after Saturday's discussion ended without an agreement for the U.S. and Iran. So they're very much being encouraged not to be hasty, leading to U.S. launching a blockade of the Straits of Hormuz. And so the U.S. is continuing to look for leverage in order for it to have the upper hand in these talks. And Iran refuses to give that leverage. Iranian President Pezeshkian has reportedly announced Iran is prepared to continue talks with the U.S. after no agreement was made following their 21 long-hour discussion held on the Shabbat. The announcement comes after the U.S. has launched a blockade on the Straits of Hormuz, which Trump vows to take control of the vital shipping route. So the people who live there can't control it, but we can from 13,000 miles away. Because that makes all the sense in the world, folks. And that is just the way it's going to be, right? Doesn't that sound a little off to you? It does to me. And I'm certain it does to most of the citizens of the world. And so this is part of the problem is, when you're in an echo chamber and everybody just tells you you're awesome, you might get kind of advice that way. In a phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said his country is prepared to continue talks, and the Islamic Republic of Iran is prepared to continue talks solely within the framework of international laws and regulations with the aim of safeguarding the rights of the Iranian people. And so, again, the conversation, or the rhetoric anyway, seems to be very moderate. Seems to continue to paint the United States and Israel as intolerant and sort of unreasonable bullies, which unfortunately for those two countries, the United States, which we're in, and of course Israel, the world is actually buying that argument. It is increasingly moving away from supporting the United States and Israel in any conflict. And this is not boding well for public relations going forward. So this doesn't look good as we continue down this road. Now, of course, the U.S. warships just had to do this because they've got to, it is very, very animalistic, I will say, as they absolutely have to just do this. So U.S. warships did, in fact, cross the Strait of Hormuz for the first time since Iran war began. So they were able to move through the straits. But now, of course, what they're doing is they're removing mines, and mines that were placed there by Iran that Iran doesn't have full knowledge of where they all are. The reports that I saw is Iran just dropped a bunch of mines all over the place, and then they went, well, where are they? And they were like, well, we don't know. We don't know where they are. We just dropped them everywhere. So So now the challenge, of course, now this is what a mess. Okay, what a mess. Which, by the way, the Straits of Hormuz, last I checked, before this entire thing was going on, was already open. It was open. So all y'all had to do was just not start any problem, and it would have stayed open. And do you know how much Iran was getting up until that point for every ship that went through the Straits of Hormuz? Nothing. Nothing. They weren't involved. So this went backward. This went backward. And this happens sometimes in war. You think you're going to go this way and it ends up going the other way. Your enemy ends up with more territory than you thought. And so I see this as a very interesting backfire, and very sad when you really think about it, because again, um, this is the time period that we were hoping to see some peace, and instead, what we're seeing is more conflict on the way. And China's military, according to military.com, is aiding the Iranians, of course. So this is going to continue to create. This is on military.com, folks. So very credible source. China's military weapons aid of Iran may cause a larger geopolitical rift, and I think that's a very reasonable um, suspicion. And I don't think China cares. I think China has really summed up the United States with the Epstein files, and they continue to do this. They continue to basically throw all 350 million Americans under the same bus, which is one of the problems that we have with some of this propaganda. And now Chinese officials deny that they will provide Iran with weapons shipments and air defense systems, but they don't have to acknowledge it. This is all being done underground. You don't have any above ground roads that you need to see. And they can do all their shipping underground. You would never even know they shipped anything. And so this is what makes a lot of this ridiculous. And so this is all posturing. China is prepared to deliver new air defense systems. They already did to Iran in coming weeks, already done, according to 3 U.S. intelligence sources cited by CNN. Already done. This is why Iran is acting so arrogantly. They have anti-stealth air defense systems now, which means that even the stealth bombers can be shot down. This is very dangerous now for the U.S., which usually enjoys air superiority. Not anymore. And so, again, I think what you're going to see is a continued collaborative effort by the axis of powers that are against the West. And it's not even the West anymore. You used to be able to say the West, meaning Western Europe, including Canada, United States, and Western countries. Not anymore, man. They're not united at all. The United States aren't even united anymore. The states aren't. The rifts between states is growing. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a devolution in the United States itself. The amount of infighting, the amount of strife and division that has now been loosed as a spirit in the nations is unprecedented in my lifetime. And so if you're like me, you're going, oh boy, this is really bad. This is as bad as, remember when you saw The Winds of War? Remember that series that came out in the early 80s and we all watched it? This is as bad as anything that we saw in that leading up to World War II. And what we're seeing are the same kinds of rhetoric, the same kinds of excuses, and the same kinds of justifications, guys, for mass murder. And we're talking entire people groups that were wiped out, again, back in the early 1900s. So are we seeing something that's a prelude for the same thing? Well, many people would say we're already seeing it, depending upon where you're listening to your news or depending upon whose side you are on, quote unquote. They're already performing a genocidal effort. And so this has become very, very dangerous. And we do pray for all those that are in the area of concern. And certainly that may change, right? So for 1 minute, you think it's in one area and the next thing it's in another. And we do continue to think about the different religious perspectives, because futurism, as well as prophecies and beliefs by groups, i.e., the Masons who follow, the Albert Pike things, Well, they're going to go with a certain mindset. The Muslim community has a certain mindset. The Christian community has a certain mindset, and the Jewish community, not all, a portion anyway, have a certain mindset. So all of this is fueling decisions being made because of futurism, because people believing things are yet to come and are somehow manipulating events. And the U.S. and Iran, of course, did not make the deal happen. And despite marathon talks, it just didn't come together. And I think one of the reasons is the expectations of the United States, believing its own press, was that when they got over there, the Iranians, they would just make a deal, take some money, and be done. But that's not the case. The two sides have been far apart on negotiations, with the Iranians demanding total sovereignty over the Straits of Hormuz now. They didn't demand that before. They're demanding it now. And the right to enrich uranium with no limits on their ballistic missiles program, and reparations for infrastructure damage in the war. So it went from bad to worse. So when they started this negotiations back in February, I remember we reported on that, and we were hoping that they would come out with a better outcome. But we knew, because they've been talking about it for 25 years, that the die was already cast that they wanted to go to war with Iran. So Iran was prepared for this. They're a mountainous country, and it's difficult to destroy a mountain. Just saying. Not easy to do. NATO fighters jets were scrambled as a mystery Russian plane over Europe was launched with no flight plan. So that's what made it very suspicious. Polish Armed Forces Operational Command said the F-16 fighter jets have been scrambled to intercept the Russian Tu-20 reconnaissance aircraft after its transponder was turned off over the Baltic Sea. And so we're seeing increased air interdiction and interaction going on around the world. And we saw this, of course, over the South China Sea as well, folks. So what are we seeing but another ramp up of greater conflict expanding? And when there's sort of the air is filled with the purge, well, those of you that remember that movie or the theme of that movie, then you know that people tend to take advantage of these opportunities, or it's in the mindset to take advantage of opportunities like this to clean house or get rid of enemies or settle accounts, as a lot of people think. And so just understand that that's what dangerous time we're walking. That's why it's important for us to walk in love and make sure we minister reconciliation unto all men. And but that, of course, is not in the minds of the Israeli military. And of course, we're seeing more and more rhetoric that sounds to me like they're preparing for more conflict. Israeli military is preparing for a new Iran conflict as Middle East war fears explode. And again, as we've already reported, over 3 million people living in Israel have departed. And they're probably not likely to return anytime soon. And so this is going to have a generational impact on not only the countries in the Middle East, but also Israel as well. And Israel's military chief has ordered troops to prepare for the war in Iran to resume as peace talks with the U.S. stall. And the Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff Zamir is understood to have made the instructions following the breakdown of the peace talks between the United States and Iran in Pakistan. So again, getting ready, gearing up, as if the conflict on the ground is a foregone conclusion. I think this bodes very badly for Western forces. So I'm going to go on the record as saying this will be a slaughter. And it will be embarrassingly bad slaughter. So the notion that you're just going to send in the GI Joes and they're going to just take over everything, that's not worked ever, ever. So unfortunately, that is not likely to work in this situation, and most likely going to cause some serious backlash. Speaking of backlash, one of the things that you and I are going to feel is the way in which these things impact our economy. And the head of the IMF says The Iran war will permanently scar global economy, even if peace is reached. So, because of the damage that has already been done and the things that these, geniuses went off and did on their own anyway, this damage has already been concluded. There isn't a way to walk some of this back. Kristalina Georgieva says even most helpful scenario will lead to growth downgrade and cause permanent hit to living standards across the earth. The head of the International Monetary Fund has warned that Iran war will permanently scar the global economy. And had it been not for the outbreak of the conflict 6 weeks ago, the IMF would have upgraded its global growth outlook for 2026. But now, even our most hopeful scenario, she says, involves a growth downgrade. Even in a best case, there will be no neat and clean return to the status quo. You see that? No neat and clean return to the status quo. So, folks, the damage done by this conflict is going to last a while. This isn't going to be something that you can just sweep up. No, the impact is going to be felt. So you all have to now adjust accordingly. And those that did not take seriously the warnings, well, they will now, as life gets more difficult and the curse becomes much more easy. It's much easier to discern. China is restricting airspace for 40 days in a signal of intense military activity. So this has, of course, got a lot of people wondering, is China, about to launch something in the South China Sea? So this is, again, a warning shot that we are seeing indications of. And folks, one of the biggest challenges that I think the United States is going to find itself in is trying to deal with multiple fronts at once. I don't believe we have the resources, nor the manpower, nor the will to continue to extend ourselves. So this is presenting new challenges for the way in which the world is run, and that means everything changes, because the hands that used to get paid and the way things used to work, that's not the way it works anymore. No, they went and changed everything, and now the economies of the world don't work the same way. The way in which the Iranians were demanding payment for ships going through the Straits of Hormuz is crypto. That's a new thing. I mean, that smacks of Nigerian scams, right? Whatever, right? Back in the day, not anymore. Now it's legit. Okay, you want your boat to go through the Straits of Hormuz? It'll be $1 million in Bitcoin, so that nobody can mess with our money. I'm telling you, folks, the world changed, and it isn't going back. And even these who thought that they had the power and the might to go in and dictate terms, no, they don't. And so they're starting to find out that this is a lot harder than they thought. And I think this is going to continue to be more of a challenge. And I do believe that we are walking into if the United States of America goes into war over there with Iran, it's sending thousands of its boys to die. Okay, thousands. And maybe that's the plan all along. I don't know. Because now we're talking about an automatic registration for the U.S. military, which makes draft eligible men beginning in December of this year. They're not asking anymore. Now they're just basically going to be taking your sons. So that's what the draft is, by the way. The draft is seizing young men to send them to war, with or without your, no parental consent required. Just seize your young men. And this, when it hits a generation, it's a different thing than when you read about it in a book or you hear about it from a distance. No, it's real. It's taking young people and making them military, which makes them targets. Automatic registration into the U.S. military draft pool for eligible men is slated to begin in December, following efforts from lawmakers in the Selective Service Agency to streamline the previous self-registration process. And so they're automating it so that you don't get a choice. It's not, you don't got to go down to the post office like you used to, where you had to file it yourself. No, now they're going to automatically register you. That way, when they call you up, it ain't up to you to show you got to go. And so this is going to continue to be something we watch. Meanwhile, of course, we did see the ceasefire efforts were praised. I mean, they made a big deal out of, hey, we got a ceasefire. But what good is a ceasefire if you can't come to a permanent agreement? And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Wednesday he supports President Trump's 2-week ceasefire with Iran. But again, it looked a lot like they were just basically rearming. And so getting ready for yet another attack and getting their ships fixed and so forth. So, of course, Trump is warning U.S. forces are going to stay, and, of course, now being used to commission a blockade across the region. So what are your thoughts, folks? What do you think is going to likely happen here, especially in light of what many are expecting in terms of Bible prophecy? And why does this matter? Because regardless of the belief you particularly have, they are futurists. So futurists, if you think with a futurist mentality, are expecting things to happen up here. So they're marching in a certain way. They're sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in a certain way. So this is, and again, some of this is very coordinated. It manipulates people in mass. So it is huge. It does amazing amounts of work. They've been doing this for a long time, hundreds of years. They've been using the same technique. So it's not a new technique being used to manipulate mass numbers of people, folks. So again, that's why I'm very suspicious of a lot of this, because it's not a new thing by a long shot. Now, by the way, we did see, of course, the ceasefire did prevent the nuclear power plants and the power generation in Iran from being blown up, which is supposed to be, according to the Geneva Convention, I believe it is supposed to be off limits. You're not supposed to do that. So if you're going to have a war, you have war against military forces, but you don't have war against infrastructure, because those are apparently cheap shots, right? And so the youth of Iran formed a human chain around the power plants, and this was very, very uniting and affirming to the Iranian people. So this backfired. Okay, this ended up, you were thinking you're going to regime change. Now they're out flying flags. So that did not work out. So a lot of backfires, a lot of miscalculations, and the way in which a lot of this is unfolding is looking as if presumptions and assumptions were made maybe a decade or two ago that are just not true anymore. And they repeated those assumptions so often that they all assumed they were true until they were tested. And now they're no longer even considered reasonable. So basically, now what we're seeing is, again, the blockade of the Straits of Hormuz is preventing ships from entering or exiting all of Iran's ports. And President Trump vowed to carry on the blockade as a means to strangle Iran's already weakened economy as the U.S. and Israel wage war on its, what it calls, terrorist regime. And it depends on your perspective. There's a lot of the world that believes it's the other way around. So, folks, hang on to your hat, because this is far from over. And you can see that right here in the price of oil, as it hit record highs near $150 a barrel. Okay, that is a ridiculous price for oil. So that's speaking of $6 to $7 gas prices, folks, per gallon. That's what that's calling into existence. If this thing isn't resolved quickly, this is what we're looking at. And so European and Asian refiners are paying record high prices of near $150 a barrel for some crude oil grades, far exceeding prices for paper futures, highlighting the worsening supply crisis from the U.S.-Israel war in Iran. And Iran was forced to shut down at least 12 million barrels a day, about 12% of the world's supply, from the Middle East due to Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And as a result, Brent oil futures reached $119 a barrel last month, and the highest since 2022, although still short of the 2008 record of $147.50. But it is on its way. And I don't think that record is safe. What do you guys think? Do you think that record is safe at this point? Or do you think we're likely to see prices north of $147.50 for Brent which is not even the best out there. And so this is really, really going to get expensive. So how does this affect you? It not only affects our ability to buy gasoline, right? So we already can see that, all of us can see that. But the ripple effect is the cost of transportation on everything. So that affects everything in society. So that means everything gets more expensive. There's nowhere else for that money to come from. So the consumer, again, even in the peaceful countries, is the one that are going to pay for it. They're the ones that are hit by those types of policies. And here we go, folks. And Iran is launching huge cyber attacks against the U.S. as critical infrastructure is hit. And so we were commenting about this. Oh, in the last couple of years, we talked about this several times. How that our infrastructure is not hardened, and that we don't have the kind of security systems that we really need. We developed here at New Kingdom ImageLock DX, but that is the only locking mechanisms that would have prevented this kind of technology or this type of infrastructure hit. There isn't anything else out there. So they've got a real problem in terms of security going forward. You're going to wage a war, you better start getting your stuff secure. Iran launched this huge cyber attack against the U.S., and it is seemingly ignoring chilling threats from Donald Trump to strike a deal. Doesn't care. Is not interested. They're riding high as their own state, and hackers disrupted critical infrastructure sectors and caused financial losses via malicious interactions, and urged the U.S. organizations to urgently review their networks to reduce the risk of compromise. There's been several notifications that I've seen in the last few days warning of changing passwords or getting your cybersecurity house in order. Why? Well, because the world is becoming a more intrusive place. And again, I told you guys a while ago, remember those Vault 7? WikiLeaks talked about Vault 7 and how that was released into the public. Well, those were hacking tools for hacking, like CIA hacking tools, so that you could learn how to hack anything. And so once we saw that was going into the public, I think that was like 2016, I want to say. And when that went into the public, forget it. You knew that you were going to have a hackathon. It's going to be a hackathon because it was just publicly, for any hacker wanted them. Come on, man. You giving away CIA tools? That was a bad idea. So, how many are shocked that systems are being hacked? Come on. All right. So that is a reality now that we're going to see major security issues. And of course, Israel is not taking a backward step during this time period. They are continuing to attack on a very aggressive basis Hezbollah in Lebanon. And this, of course, created a major rift during the recent discussions because there was a discussion as to whether Lebanon was included in the ceasefire. And it did, in fact, jeopardize the ceasefire. So it basically, Israel said it wiped out Hezbollah's chief top secretary and targeted strikes in Lebanon overnight as it ramped up attacks. So, of course, these poor folks don't know if they're going to be alive the next day. And this is the way in which they perish with this kind of explosions and destruction and so forth. So this is becoming common. Life is cheap in the Middle East. And I think it's a horrible, horrible indictment on what we as the West thought we were supporting, what many countries thought they were supporting with the establishment of the state of Israel, what many people, when they went on tourist trips and so forth, thought they were getting involved in. And now I think a lot of people are taking a second look, a harder, more critical look at the Israeli regime. Not because we don't believe in, the promised land or any of that, but because this is behavior that is hard to endorse, hard to stand with as we see this unfolding. In fact, Pakistan's defense minister is calling for the destruction of Israel. That's how far to that side there are. Now, again, we're not with that, but we can certainly understand why this sentiment is growing. Why there's more vocal statements like this that are absolutely condemning the Jewish state. And of course, we've got in the West, we've got Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and others that have made their comments. But this is really getting viral. So Pakistan's defense minister triggered a firestorm after posting an openly anti-Semitic tirade against Israel, prompting swift and forceful condemnation for Israeli officials. And of course it is, because Pakistan, of course, is a serious power and in the region, and is now hosting the talks between the United States and Iran. And yet this is its position. Hard to say that it's a neutral party. It believes that, or at least certain officials within its government believe that Israel shouldn't even exist. So there's that. So that doesn't bode well for Israel's future if you've got regional partners that are essentially saying you just need to cease to exist. That's bad. That's bad news, folks. And for those who are looking for Armageddon, well, that's setting up to look a lot like it. Hormuz closure is threatening global food supply. And they're telling you that the hikes are coming. And it's not just because of the cost of the increase in transportation costs, although that is a huge part of it. So the global crude oil trade, or similar share of the world's liquefied natural gas shipments, also are a factor. But modern agriculture depends on precise timing of delivery of nutrients of plants, and fertilizer arriving late or becoming too expensive to buy in sufficient quantities. Farmers are left to either reduce the amount they use or plant fewer crops. So the fertilizer is now becoming the new issue that is now coming to light. And is that going to affect you? Yes. It's going to affect our food production. And so we need to be better at reclaiming our soil, recovering our own areas of food production. And I think we're going to be moving away from the glyphosate-filled fields, because even if things were great, what are they using? So this is actually pushing society to look at all of these topics that we've taken for granted. Probably a good idea. Now, in Tehran, this is a very interesting story. There's pushback coming from the Jewish community in Tehran against Israel. Who thought that was interesting? The Israeli attack on Tehran's synagogue proves, according to this article, complete hatred for Iran's Jews, for the Jewish community in Iran. And so when they attacked an actual ancient Jewish synagogue, and this was like targeted, obviously that sent a signal to the Jewish community right there in Tehran, of all places. So 3 buildings were completely destroyed. Many people were injured, even in the buildings far from explosion. Sacred objects suffered extensive damage, and lawmakers said that the aggression, which comes amid the unprovoked and illegal war on Iran, reflects the Tel Aviv regime's deep-seated animosity toward Iran's Jewish community. What do you folks think? I think that's very interesting that a synagogue would have made a target list. I don't think these bombs drop indiscriminately. So I think that somebody has to pick a target, and somebody picked this target. So does that send a message that they're really not united as you might want to think, and instead are more interested in a different agenda? Certainly looks like that to a lot of folks. Okay. Here's something else that's got people going, dun, dun, dun. What's going on here, right? One thing that's got people, we mentioned this last week, how that was like 8 or 9 nuclear scientists, or really smart people, just disappearing. And now we've got the 10th nuclear official person tied to dark pattern surrounding U.S. secrets. And while we're looking at this like, what's going on? This is serious, guys. People are just disappearing. Another person with links to America's nuclear secrets has gone missing, as the disturbing list of deaths and disappearances in recent years continues to grow. Stephen Garcia, 48, vanished without a trace on August 28, 2025. He was last seen leaving his Albuquerque, New Mexico home on foot, carrying only a handgun. An anonymous source told Daily Mail that Garcia was a government contractor working for Kansas City National Security Campus, a major facility in Albuquerque that plays a key behind-the-scenes role in America's national defense. So what's going on here, folks? Do we got some things going on where people who are involved in the national defense, maybe in our key military industries, are being picked off or grabbed up or sequestered? Who knows what's going on? Maybe they're building something we've never seen before. Maybe they're being put together in a room to build something. That's been done before. Think the Manhattan Project. Come on, folks. You got to know that sometimes they throw people in a room and they say, build this. We got 20 experts. So that could be, but they could also be gone. So what's going on? Very much an interesting mystery afoot. Here's another mystery that's afoot and involves AI. I don't like to talk about this too much because too many people are already scared of this, but this is a ominous sign. This particular company, Anthropic, has some very questionable ethics, serious issues with regards to the way in which people are treated. Nothing has a heavier surveillance overhead. Just hint, folks. And Anthropic's Claude Mythos model sparks fear of AI doomsday if released to the public, weapons we can't even envision. Some things are too smart. They have too much intelligence without ethics. This is a problem, folks. Anthropic has triggered alarm bells with touting its terrifying capabilities of Claude Mythos, with executives warning that the new AI model is so dangerous it will cause a wave of catastrophic hacks and terror attacks if released to the wider public. So, once again, do you need Image Lock DX, which is the only lock AI cannot crack? Do you need it? Do you think so? Do you think the days of that are coming and coming quickly? I believe they are. I believe that you needed to be in front of it in order to endure to the end. I believe that there are some serious things that are coming for our world, and those things involve a tremendous amount of security issues that are going to continue to plague our society. There's just no way around it. And so now we're going to continue to see more degradation. One thing I mentioned earlier was that because of poverty and the way in which people are impacted by poverty and the way in which people are impacted by society, you're going to start seeing crazy events, crazy things like this. Multiple people injured in a shooting as a group of masked men storm a New Jersey Chick-fil-A and just open fired. This was crazy. A shooting broke out in a New Jersey Chick-fil-A Saturday night, leaving multiple people injured after a group of men stormed in, went behind the food counter, and opened fire, according to reports. The horror unfolded just before 9 p.m. at the fast food chain on Route 22, location in Union, which has since been locked down, of course. And basically, you're seeing more and more aggressive acts of violence as we go. So is this a trend that's going to continue? It looks that way. It looks like we're going to continue to see more and more violence in the system as we go. Mexico is joining in on the fray with regard to a holistic health system, and they're bringing their people into what many in Mexico are calling a scary, foreboding thing. Because you'd have to have identification in order for this to be implemented. So Mexico is moving toward a historic universal healthcare system. And anytime you see the word universal, everybody ought to get a little concerned about that word, right? So Mexico is moving toward a single public healthcare system under President Claudia Sheinbaum, with a plan that will combine the country's main state-run institutions into one structure. Of course, they are looking to consolidate that power as much as possible. This is, again, common in this era. Now, last week we talked about the Shroud of Turin. Remember that? And that's always been a real area of mystery and fun, as we not fun, but I mean interesting in terms of looking at it and understanding it. And I thought this report was really interesting. It just came out, and essentially proof of the resurrection. And because of the way in which this was done, a breakthrough light experiment proves that Mashiach's resurrection, we don't have that kind of power on earth. The resurrection of Messiah has long been essential to the mystery of faith, but scientists have claimed to have found evidence that may prove the biblical event. And Italian physicist and chief researcher in central and Frascati, Italy, spent 5 years attempting, I'm not sure why it's doing that, to review the Shroud of Turin. Again, folks, see, this is the stupidity of these websites. Terrible design. They think they're going to make $1 million bucks with these dumb ads, and nobody clicks on them. So it's just a waste of time. It's really dumb. Just saying. There we go. We'll just exact that. And so the findings were really interesting. I'm going to go ahead and click out of here because it's not working. But the story was very interesting because what it said was the amount of energy needed to bring the resurrection to life. In other words, to bring his body back to life is what caused the Shroud of Turin, and that the amount of power is something that we couldn't reproduce. So that was the gist of the article, which I thought, that's fascinating. How many of you think that's interesting that they're, the more they look at this, the more they're going, yeah, no, maybe that really did happen. Maybe, just maybe, we actually did have something happen back there, right? And so they're slowly but surely wanting to admit that. And so, folks, this is the way in which the world is changing. And there's a 60% now have an unfavorable view of Israel. So this is now going to spill over into, of course, all believers. Unfortunately, this does affect us. So Paul finds that 60% of Americans have an unfavorable view of Israel, up sharply since 2022. And so again, how does this impact the gospel? How does this impact the way in which we function as the remnant? Well, it impacts us a great deal because we get all linked together, and that is unfortunate. Well, that's it for tonight. I pray this broadcast has been a berakah to you, and thank you to all of you who had the grace to wait for us, as we always have the challenges. We've got more storms coming through. Those of you that prayed for rain, well, your prayers have been answered. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. Shalom.